Everyone. Good morning, everyone. Just joining the call. We're going to get started in a minute or so.
Okay, so I think we're going to get started because we've actually got an action-packed day, so people will come on and join as we go. So, first of all, good morning and welcome to today's exciting, timely webinar by the IAB Programmatic Trading Committee. Today, we're talking about programmatic outcomes. So, all I want for the holidays is great outcomes. We did debate whether we should use Christmas or holidays, just to be clear, that debate has already happened. Look, as we enter the final month of the year, hopefully this panel will get you feeling a little bit festive and very well planned for the holiday. So I'm Simon Housted. I work for IAB Europe as a senior advisor to the Programmatic and Brand Advertising Committees. Today, we have an incredible lineup of industry experts who are going to share their insights about how to ensure Q4 success and how they approach the challenges to get great outcomes for their brand or client or partner or DSP partner if from the publishing side. Q4 is traditionally the biggest quarter of the year, so advertisers competing for consumer attention and crucial sales to see out the year. For publishers, it's a must-hit quarter, and the pressure is on to deliver and succeed client needs and expectations. So just before we start, I just want to run you through a couple of housekeeping notes. Webinar is being recorded, will be made available to all of you in the coming days. If you've registered, you'll get a copy emailed to you. It will be available on the IAB website, so you can revisit it at your own convenience. We have a lot of questions today, so we are going to try and cover them in, but there is a Q&A that's possible. So please do feel free to add questions to the Q&A. If we have time, we'll try and work through those towards the end. But the group here have so much to say, they've prepared lots of great questions to cover. This session is part of our IAB Europe's work to support the industry in navigating the complexities of digital advertising, especially as we look to close out the year and head into 2025. So with that, I'm really honoured to introduce our expert moderator and chair of the Programmatic Trading Committee and lots of other things, Wayne. Wayne, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. For those who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Wayne Tassie. I'm Group Director of Integrated Solutions at Double Verify, and more importantly today, Chair of IAB Europe's Programmatic Trading Committee. Now, I know we're a little bit early, but I thought, we'd all try and feel a little bit festive-y this morning as we go through this, and we've got a panel of amazing industry leaders and industry thought leaders that are going to talk to you a lot about their companies, how we're looking at Q4, how we're investing around programmatic, and how we are generating great outcomes as we lead up to 2025. So to get into this, I'm going to call on each panelist individually. When I call on you, could you start by introducing yourself and sharing one aspect of our industry in Q4 that you find particularly enjoyable or exciting? And I'm going to call on Rory first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rory. I work at John Lewis Retail, overseeing all of the programmatic campaign activity business. And I'd say the thing I'm most excited about in Q4, without wanting to sound too money-driven, I would say is budgets. The fact that this time of year we have much larger budgets than any other time, and the opportunities that come along with that.
That's amazing. Thanks, Rory. Alice.
Hi, I'm Alice Beecroft. I work as Senior Director for Partnerships and DSP Strategy over at Yahoo across International. And I think the thing that I'm most interested or excited about in Q4 is actually seeing that convergence starting to happen between measurement of online shopper budgets and offline shopper budgets. We're seeing this happen not only in the UK and Europe, but also happening across other markets such as the US and Australia. And partly that's being driven by technology, but it's also being driven by the retail media networks that are starting to come into, I suppose, our ecosystem, which is really, really exciting.
I love a bit of retail media. Charlie.
Cheers, Wayne. Yeah, I'm Charlie Pullen, and I'm a Programmatic Business Director at MGO&D. I look after John Lewis. I work for Rory closely, along with a number of different clients. I would say that my it's testing. The opportunity to test, as Rory kind of touched on, we do have more budget to play with, and it's always the opportunities that come up through testing. We need to be for innovators for our clients, and with that additional budget and more competitive market, we need to be pushing boundaries, and this is kind of the key period to do it. It can be a little bit risky for clients. They can feel a little bit apprehensive, but it's our job to kind of like push those boundaries and make sure we're innovating.
Perfect. Thank you, Charlie. And Alicia.
Hi, I'm Alicia and I am Client Strategy Director at Bliss. I think my answers may be a little bit different to everyone else's on the panel. My favourite thing about this time of year is how much everybody just loves ads. It's the only time of year that seems to happen. And there's as much anticipation for the release of like the John Lewis ad as there is for the Christmas Day special of Gavin and Stacey. And I just don't think that you get that buzz and that excitement around advertising at any other time of year. So that's what I love the most.
Thanks, Alicia. I mean, I have to say, I'm very much looking forward to Gavin and Stacey on Christmas Day. I think we've all been waiting for that one for quite a while. I'm going to say the thing that everyone's thinking, but no one said. I love the Christmas lunches. I love catching up with everyone. I love getting out and seeing everyone. I think Q4 is so incredibly busy for all of us that, you know, as we go into December and late November, it gives us all an opportunity to really kind of decompress and connect with all of our partners that we've been working with throughout the year and just really share some festive cheer. We're going to move on to our second question, and we're going to stick with Alicia. From the perspective of your company's role within the programmatic ecosystem, what do you see as the biggest challenge that's unique to this time of year, and how are you addressing it?
So the biggest challenge I think that we see, and it's definitely across the board, is that lack of resource. Everybody is under so much pressure at this time of year. People have got those bigger budgets, but it also means there's a lot more work. And so one of the things that we launched from a pragmatic perspective is assisted self-serve, to be able to really alleviate some of that pressure and basically run campaigns programmatically for advertisers. It's fully transparent. They have access to understand what's going on with that campaign, but it's just taking away some of that additional pressure. And we've definitely seen more uptake of assisted self-serve in the last couple of months.
Good to hear. And Rory?
Yeah, I think for us, it's the sheer volume of campaigns that we've got going on at this time of year, especially retail media campaigns. So for us, what we end up having is quite a lot of very similar products all being live at the same time in a very condensed period, which we've actually seen this year more exacerbated than previous years. So we saw lower investment in that run up to peak, sort of August to October time, but far more investment over this time with budgets being condensed from various supplier brands. But what it means is effectively we may have 5 laptop brand campaigns live at the same time, which puts a lot of pressure on our first party data audiences, which are really one of the key selling points around that activity and why brands want to invest with us. So it really requires quite a lot of active planning with all of the supplier brands to make sure we minimize overlap as much as possible to protect those first party data audiences from oversaturation of similar ads, and also to protect the campaigns as well. Because if we have far too many going after the same audience, then obviously performance gets negatively impacted.
I can imagine. I bet it's really busy. Rory, just sticking with retail media for a second, how do you see that growing programmatically over the coming years?
Yeah, it's definitely a massive growth area for our business and something that we're putting a lot of attention and effort into. I think, as I mentioned there before, one of the key points around it and around the growth of it is first party data. That is something that is incredibly valuable for a business the size of John Lewis, with the breadth of customer information and data we have. That's really one of the key points for these brands, is being able to speak to these high value audiences in the open market.
Absolutely. We're going to come on to the open market a little bit later, but it's a really good topic around that. And Alice?
I mean, I think from our side, it's just in shopping habits change around Christmas time, and every single year is slightly different. People potentially sort of shift from doing most of their shopping online and shift to actually doing it to go into store. So it's about being able to ensure that we're actually connecting the consumer journey with the different sort of potential channels that we can activate across. And so whether that's, brand building through like the amazing ads that are coming from the likes of John Lewis on sort of TV screens, or whether or not it's actually using out of home as a way to sort of push that sort of intent actually to go into store to actually make those purchases. It's about being able to connect those dots and ensure that we're actually harnessing all the different channels, and also being able to sort of bring that back to the brands and to the agencies to actually show like the best actual path that you should be taking when sort of connecting those channels together. Yeah, Christmas is a little bit of a misnomer. People don't necessarily act the way that they normally act when it comes to shopping. So yeah, so it's really about taking advantage of all the different screens and connecting those dots together.
I know, I know that feeling. I feel like I'm a marketer's dream. Like literally, when it comes to Q4, I like to be very spenny. It's like monkey see, monkey buy, regardless. So yeah, I definitely see how consumer habits are changing there. Before we move on to the next question, just a reminder for those that are joining at the moment, if you do have any questions for our panelists, please add them to the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. So let's move on to the next question. How far in advance does your company start planning for the festive season? And what are the key considerations that guide your strategy in this critical period? I'm going to start with Charlie.
Cheers, Wayne. It's pretty, and in summary, it's the whole year. I would say that myself and Rory, John Lewis, that Christmas moment it's a big pivotal moment for the business. Obviously consumers, because everyone's waiting for it, but for the actual John Lewis business, it is a pivotal moment, like most retailers in that Q4 period. So we actually start planning to give an actual date to it. The creative agency will be starting on that sometimes February, sometimes March, latest April. We would then be in a position, and again, Rory, jump in if I'm incorrect on this, but first drafts kind of coming over late summer, and we're kind of in a really good place from a creative perspective, to be ready. From a media activation perspective, though, there's a lot that we have to do because, again, the creative agency that John Lewis do, which are fantastic, Saatchi, have built obviously some fantastic ads. I think we've done really well this year, but previously they want to tell an amazing story. That takes a long period of time, like 120 seconds, 180 seconds. Long form content is becoming less and less inviting and to try and entice those consumers in. So I think we did a really good job this year in terms of kind of getting those. We got the 60-second cut down on YouTube, which was fantastic. But then we were getting some comments on the feedback saying, why are you only showing us a 60-second cut down? We want to see the whole thing. So it's a really interesting one where in the normal circumstance, we would want to do the shorter form content to get people onto site and get to take an action. However, from the feedback we initially saw this year, maybe that is as Alice kind of alluded to, it's a different time of year. Maybe we do need to keep to that 120 seconds. There's obviously a cost implication for it, but that is a big consideration. More broadly speaking, when we're planning that media, it's the biggest shift I've seen for John Lewis Christmas this year is the focus on video and less on display in general. And I think we've seen this across most of my clients. So when we're planning, we're trying to look at the marketplace, seeing just generally how CPMs and cost per views are going to be within that time period, and trying to be really tactful with our investment. Like every client has a finite amount of budget, and then we need to get that further and further for them, get more return on investment for them. So it's very challenging, but in terms of the actual strategic approach, we're looking obviously about the previous year's learnings from the John Lewis ads, but we're looking more broadly at the marketplace and trying to say, okay, where can we carve out a way in which we can kind of get that cut through, which is becoming more difficult. But I feel that online video this year, if I look at YouTube ads now on CTV, on the big space, on the big screen, you can potentially have 4 or 5 different brands that before you watch, like let's say a fitness video or a shopping video that you're watching. So again, how are we going to get into that cut through for our clients?
I mean, Charlie, I'm sure there's audience members shouting at the screen right now going, I can't believe he's trying to cut down the John Lewis advert. I mean, it's pretty iconic, especially when it comes to long form content. It's probably one of the few adverts that you could probably get away with making as long as you like. On that note, I'm going to come to Rory to get his POV on this.
Yeah, no, as Charlie mentioned, really peaking Christmas planning is virtually all year round. I think internally at John Lewis, we have our first Christmas meeting in early March, which is really bizarre. It still feels like you're just getting over last Christmas. So it is virtually a full year process for us. And I think the kind of crucial part of it on our side in terms of getting creative is what content is actually going to be available at that time of year. As Alicia mentioned before, resources are really stretched at this time of year. So what we have to do a lot of work in advance is making sure that we actually have the infrastructure in place to deliver all the creative that we need. We work with 3 separate creative agencies at John Lewis, Saatchi being the main sort of lead creative one. But it leads to quite a complex system of figuring out exactly who is going to be delivering what sort of content. One, to make sure that we actually have content live on time when it comes to campaigns like Black Friday. Actually having content to go live at the start date is crucial for us, because the more it's delayed, the worse performance is. And then also in terms of the retail media activity we have, we have to work quite hard on striking a balance between our supplier brand and the product we're promoting for them, and also making sure it's still a John Lewis ad, which we've kind of struggled with a little bit in the past, as we maybe lean a bit too much to the supplier side, and then it doesn't actually drive commercial performance for our business quite as much.
Yeah, I think often in our business, the creative, I think we lose sight of the fact that the creative is massively pivotal to the success of any digital campaign. And it kind of really pains me when you see a TV ad that they've literally tried to just turn into an online video. It doesn't necessarily translate well, and it doesn't work. Rory, I'm going to stick with you because this actually leads quite nicely into our next question, which: how does creative strategy play a role in shaping your Q4 tactics, and what considerations drive its integration into your overall approach to achieving your desired outcomes? Big question, lot to unpack.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think for us as a business, obviously John Lewis is a massive business that covers a lot of different areas. So I think a key part for us is making sure that the messaging we have and the creative we have at various parts of the funnel is correct and accurate. So at the top of the funnel, we're obviously very fortunate, as Charlie mentioned, to work with a creative agency like Saatchi, who produce fantastic creative, like the Christmas ad. So in that sort of layer of activity, what we try to do is let the creative itself tell the story, because it is more about sort of emotive storytelling up at that top level. And we try to keep the branding as clean and basic as possible, really, because I think when you add in too much commercial messaging on top of that type of creative, it kind of detracts from it a little bit. So we try and leave that to just be pure emotive storytelling at the top of the funnel. And then when we come further down in the mid funnel, due to the nature of the business, we then have to sort of differentiate and split out based on customer journeys, because someone buying a jumper is a very different thought process than goes into buying a sofa. So we need to ensure that when we're turning up for people in those environments, we've got an accurate message that's relevant to them. So in that layer, we sort of focus on the range of products, and we bring in messaging that's more relevant to what they need to see. So for things like home, larger items, we focus on free delivery and that sort of selling point. For fashion, it could be click and collect, free returns, that sort of stuff. And then, sorry.
So I was just going to ask, on that specific note, how many different narratives do you actually have at that layer?
We generally split it between 5. So we sort of have 5 categories for John Lewis. So it's tech, home, fashion, kids, what's the last one? Nursery, I think, and beauty, sorry.
Beauty as well.
Yeah, beauty. So that's generally the sort of directorates we work within. Obviously, within that, you then have a broad range as well. So you can dilute further between home, someone buying, a sofa versus a cushion is obviously completely different as well. So it does become quite complicated, and there's a lot of different messages that are going on at the same time. And then finally, in the bottom funnel, that's where we kind of leave that layer of activity for retail media. Because generally the brands want to be driving sales at John Lewis. So we sort of try and create basic templates that work for both brands, that leave open space for offer-driven messaging, which at this time of year is really quite crucial and drives a lot of performance for us. And then also product information as well. And we kind of allow the retail media section of the business to do that lower funnel job, and then focus more on sort of video activity for that upper to mid funnel activity.
Awesome. Thanks, Rory. Alice, let's come to you on that.
So, I mean, I have to say, I agree with a lot of what Rory said. I mean, this time of year, creative is absolutely critical. I mean, we have internally a creative agency, we have a TV studio, we do a lot of AR, amazing studio that you can go in and, you know, put the suit on and do sort of peculiar things and really sort of be immersed into the ad. But sort of coming back to what Rory was saying, I mean, this time of year, it's all about tapping into that emotional connection. It's a really fine balance to get that emotional connection within the creative, whilst also finding that balance between wanting to sort of push arguably an offer or a promotion that's sort of, you know, going through. We did a study earlier in the year with Magna Global IPG, and off the back of that, I mean, 56% of advertisers basically sort of were saying it's the creative quality and it's the creative messaging that actually drives up that purchase intent, whether that's like immediate for the short term or whether that's long term. There is that sort of, it's about that creative quality and making that sort of creative emotional connection with the consumer that almost like sort of seals the deal. I mean, I do think we ought to talk about DCO within that. I mean, there is the way to be able to harness first party data to be able to potentially expand outside of those, you know, 6 categories that you mentioned that there, Rory, to really sort of bring that emotional connection through the actual product that potentially shows interest to the consumer. And we definitely see a lot more of that being harnessed in Q4, and also not just basically from a sort of a retail purchase perspective, but even like from the alcohol brands, for example, that sort of whole sort of concept of how the weather is changing pretty much on a daily basis right now, and actually using that to drive people into the bars, into the pubs, into the restaurants, etc. So yeah, but creative is so critical, but it's all about making that emotional connection.
I love that analogy. The weather's bad, let's go drinking. So true. It's that time of year, really. Alicia, let's come to you on this.
I mean, yeah, echoing a lot of what Alice has said and a bit of what Rory said. We also have our own kind of creative in-house studio, and they are busier than ever. Twofold, really. One of the kind of functions of that is, like Alice mentioned, repurposing those ads and adding in kind of performance features. So whether that be kind of like a map to store or adding in gamifications, super popular at this time of year where you're trying to get people where they are in that lower funnel, but making sure that those ads are still super engaging. The second part of that, and this year we've seen more of this than ever before, is about offering support omni-channel. So lots of people spend a lot of money on those big TV ads like we've talked about, but maybe those creative partners don't have the time or the resource to build those assets for every single channel. So we've done a lot of repurposing and taking assets and turning them into digital out of home, or repurposing video and turning it into display to help kind of support advertisers on that journey. So I think it does come back to that point I made earlier about resource. It's kind of really offering that support to brands and agencies and being able to take over some of that heavy lift. But we also know that omnichannel works best as well. So being able to ensure that you're reaching all of those audiences in all those different places, like Alice mentioned earlier, is really important from that performance perspective. So we want to make sure that we're enabling all of our clients to do that.
Alicia, you bring up a really good point. I feel like there was a time when we really used to kind of go deep with omni-channel discussions. And I think, you know, going back to basics, I think we forget around, you know, how important this time of year omni-channel is, and the kind of media halo effect and driving people and, you know, through that funnel, through different channels and different consumer touch points, whether it be out of home, whether it be digital, whether it be TV. And I think, omnichannel within Q4, especially when it comes to retail, is just kind of really key for many brands, to be successful. And this kind of leads on to the next question, which I'm going to come to Charlie on this first of all. What key metrics kind of guide your investment or initiative decisions, and how do they influence your strategy during this critical period from an agency POV?
It's a really good point. I would say that overall, most clients in general now go off some form of MMM or an MTA analysis to inform their budgets. So previous campaign performance does come into that, and it's still a consideration, but there is a huge focus for any e-com, but any big brands now to focus on some form of econometrics modeling to inform their budget decisions. We also have Omni within MG, which is a fantastic tool that allows our client teams to actually look at the MMM results. It can basically digest every tactic within a media plan from above the line to below the line. And it can kind of guide you in terms of where you should spend that money based on historical data. So I would say that overall it's a combination of MMM, if clients are lucky enough to have MTA as well, which go a little bit more in depth. And then from a MG and Omnicom perspective, we have obviously the Omni tool to help guide us even further from a tactical level. So those are kind of our basic kind of, I guess, guardrails that we would use to inform our investment. In Q4, we obviously know that John Lewis in particular, and any client have obviously a wealth of budget in that, because it's a key period for any retailer. So when we come on to KPIs, I don't think it changes massively from the rest of the year. I think there's just a bigger emphasis on the outcomes. What I would say we've done fantastic work on at MG with Rory and the guys there is trying to prevent ourselves from looking at it from a media silo and understanding what the business really wants and what is a measure of success for them, and trying to see how media can actually contribute to that and how do we actually prove that. So again, MMM comes into this, but that's obviously on a quarterly basis. But we are able within the programmatic space to work towards, for example, looking at profit data, looking at margin, and how do we automatically optimize via a custom algorithm towards those key metrics. So then we're kind of going away from a ROAS objective, which is still a great objective, but we're kind of taking it really back to the business. Okay, cool. Ultimately, it doesn't matter how much revenue you bring in ultimately, because if the profit margins are minute, it's not actually aiding the business. Whereas if we can work towards actual business margin, we're actually making the business more profitable. So I would say the biggest change I've seen, not particularly in Q4, but obviously it's a big emphasis, is trying to align with business objectives and media, especially in programmatic, we're actually able to do that via the technology we have in place now.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Now, Rory, being an MG client, do you agree with Charlie's strategy here and way forward, or do you disagree?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. We're very much on the same page. As Charlie said, MMM modeling's quite important for us in terms of giving general holistic direction to budget and investment. When you look within that, it kind of depends on campaign objectives, which change for us quite a lot. So for things like retail media campaigns, because we have to work in tandem with the suppliers, they very much want to see the sort of instant results and impact, which the longer term MMM type modeling, we can't really offer them. So they're very focused on revenue driving specifically, and also sort of page uplifts, because brands want to see they've invested however much with us. They want to see how much revenue they've driven and the incremental uplift in page lifts that they're getting out of that as well. When you look further up the funnel, for us, looking at something like the Christmas ad, a big brand moment, what's key for us is really unique reach and then also incremental reach. As Charlie said, that's kind of where programmatic sits within the larger sort of marketing ecosystem, in that we want to be, for the Christmas ad, ensuring that we're basically reaching people who otherwise wouldn't have seen the ad is quite a key aspect for us. And then also making sure that we actually land the message we want to land as well, which we use brand uplift studies, search uplift studies to make sure not only are we reaching as many of the right people as possible, but we're actually having an impact on those people as well. So for this year, I think, as you mentioned before, actually, we're looking at creating more bespoke creative for placements. So we've invested extra budget to create more variations of creative to make platform optimized content with a separate social first agency who've basically taken the Christmas ad for us this year and reformatted it and cut it for things like YouTube Shorts and all these different sort of specific formats. Whereas previously we would have effectively just taken the main AV asset and then just chucked it in every other format. But we know that that doesn't work and it's not optimal. So we're investing extra this year to try and prove effectively how much of an influence and a difference having platform optimized content across all these different placements actually is.
Thanks, Rory. That actually leads quite nicely on to the next question. I'm going to come to Charlie and then I'm going to come to Alicia on this. How do you effectively measure the outcomes of your Q4 initiatives? And when reflecting on the quarter in the new year, what key achievements define success for the business?
I feel that Rory may have already partially answered this in terms of the Christmas ad, in terms of the unique reach and reach in general. I would say that for John Lewis, it's initially we can see the success of the Christmas ad on the day. And that could be moving away from like your standard programmatic metrics, more like on-site behavior, on-site visits, net new app downloads. And obviously purchases on the actual site. So I would say it's very holistic how they look at the success of the campaign. Obviously that then, when you see how that works throughout Q4, and as Rory alluded to already, we then have obviously Black Friday coming up, Cyber Monday. So there's different objectives for each of the campaigns. I would say that, but ultimately the business cares about obviously the profit that they're making, and revenue is part of that as well. In terms of how we're measuring the outcomes, if we look at it from a programmatic perspective, something that Roy slightly touched on around the brand studies, but is we also look at match market testing. So it's basically a basic holdout for anyone who doesn't know. So you can actually see, does X activity really impact some form of business outcome? So I'd say that's probably the best way that we're looking to measure. We're trying to be as scientific as possible with our measurement for just in general for John Lewis, but in particularly in Q4, because it's such a key period for them.
Perfect. Thanks, Charlie. And Alicia?
So yeah, really nice segue from what Charlie said there around kind of like holdout areas. Bliss actually have a new measurement product this year that's patent pending that's called Smart Holdout Groups. And the methodology is fully omni-channel, and it's about kind of finding geos basically and excluding some portion of those geos in that area that have exactly the same makeup. So those house prices are exactly the same, the demographic profiling is exactly the same, to make sure that you're eliminating as much kind of bias as possible. And what's really great about this, particularly for Q4, is because advertisers do have that huge focus on TV advertising, you can also apply the methodology for that. So we can provide those same geos to an AV team, they can exclude those same holdout areas, and then they can measure across that whole plan. So like TV, display, video, digital out of home, in a really holistic way, what channels are kind of driving that performance, where's that performance coming from, and then they can use that for future planning. So taking those results from Q4 and look at like, how do we plan that then across the rest of the year? So that's how we're kind of working on it from a solution basis. Yeah.
So Alicia, we've actually had a question from the audience that I'm going to put to you. It's from Nigel Ashton. Is it always about channel?
Old friends.
Is it always about omni-channel, or can a single channel, for example, a mobile app or web, also play a role in the marketing mix, especially if the KPIs are aligned? So, for example, unique reach or ROAS.
Yeah, 100%. I think it massively depends on what the KPIs are of the advertiser. we are an omnichannel platform, so that will always be our focus to talk to clients about. But at the same time, if we're having a conversation with a client and they're really focused on app downloads, then it becomes a different conversation. The measurement is still available, and we can use that to understand uplift, for example. But I think it does depend a little bit on what brands are looking to achieve and what those outcomes are that they're hoping for.
Alice, did you want to lean in on this question as well?
I completely agree with what Alicia says. I do think, apart from potentially app downloads, for the most part, what we're seeing is that the best outcomes are actually coming from having a multi-channel / omni-channel approach. We have measurement within the platform known as path to conversion, which allows you to actually see the impact that each channel brings. And time after time, we're seeing that when you actually bring together 2 or 3 channels, they actually help sort of drive greater effectiveness and greater outcomes versus taking sort of a single channel approach. However, again, as Alicia says, it totally depends on what the KPIs are, depends on what the metrics that the clients are wanting to achieve. But in most cases, even with that sort of lower funnel focus, there should still be some sort of element of long-term brand building and sort of driving that brand equity and brand loyalty. So we very much do sort of focus on that multi-channel, omni-channel approach, because all the results are showing that it does drive better outcomes in the long run.
Thanks, Alice. This actually segues quite nicely into our next question. I'm going to come to Charlie first, and then I'm going to come back to you, Alice, on this, because I want your POV from a Yahoo perspective. How have emerging programmatic opportunities, such as audio, CTV, and digital out of home, influenced your strategies and the channels you prioritize to effectively reach target audiences? And Charlie, we'll start with you.
Yeah, that's fine, Wayne. Thank you. I would say that it's changed. I'm going to touch on omni-channel as well, because I think there's a big point on here that I want to finish off with. But in terms of the media channel mix, it's definitely changed. I kind of touched on earlier that for John Lewis Christmas ad, we actually made the active decision not to run any display this year, and we focused a lot on CTV. On online video, we saw that CTV in particular, we saw there's really good MMM results across the board, and really good research saying that CTV drives incremental return investment compared to TV. It's a big screen moment for a fraction of the cost. Like if you looked at YouTube, let's say CPMs for CTV, they're obviously nowhere near a TV spot in prime time. That being said, I do still think that for John Lewis, their target market still watches TV. So even though I work in programmatic and digital, I do think there's still a great job that linear can do. How that changes over the next few years, I think will become maybe less and less. But if we look to the CTV market, let's say on YouTube, you can almost see they're mirroring what Webon is doing currently on linear. So in terms of our strategy, not just for John Lewis, just across the board, I would say there's a massive emphasis on CTV. And when I mean CTV, I'm not talking about SVOD here, even though that is part of our strategy. It's particularly, look at LG, Samsung, YouTube, obviously, is a massive part of this as well. There's a massive focus on those outlets. But then also, I would say that SVOD in particular is a huge player. And if we look at Netflix, I know that's going to be coming on to DV360 by February next year. And then Alice's point around omnichannel, we start to be able to frequency cap across the board. We look at Netflix, we onboard Disney. I would say though that with these SVOD partners, the targeting granularity obviously at the moment is demographic targeting rather than starting to kind of go down with a microscope, but that will kind of come over time. I'm sure Netflix have a wealth of data, but I think they're just seeing how it goes, and then slowly they'll overlay DSP partner data or third party data on top of that, which I know you can do on Xandr currently. On the omni-channel part, so I think the omni-channel can be looked at in different ways. I think when we say omni-channel, one goes, all right, we're linking digital out of home with display and a bit of video. It doesn't have to be that. I would say that all my clients, including John Lewis, we already do omni-channel. And that may not, but we've done a test on John Lewis Money. We did above the line and below the line, which has got fantastic results, as Alice alluded to already. But I would say that every client now is technically doing an omni-channel approach. They are running display, video, CTV, let's say, and even a bit of SVOD within the same DSP, and they're frequency capping overall. I think the key thing for this is being able to showcase to our clients, as Alice said, that you can do on Yahoo. This is how much we've saved you and reinvested back into working media. I think that's a key thing for the clients, because also if we look at the ISBA report around unknown deltas, it's such an important thing for our clients to know exactly where their investment is going. And as budgets are getting brought back just across the board, we need media to work harder. This is a perfect solution to be able to do that.
I think CTV in itself is a massively exciting opportunity over the next couple of years. I kind of see it at the moment where mobile in-app was a few years ago, before, you know, we had the OM SDK, which Double Verify kind of fed into at the time, along with many other tech companies. I think, you know, we are right now leading kind of that charge on standardizing how we measure across CTV. And I think when we get there, the investment opportunity in Europe is going to be massively substantial, far more than it is now, because we talk a good talk around CTV, but the level of investment, you know, isn't anywhere near it is, you know, in the US at the moment. And I think for us and across programmatic, next couple of years is going to be really exciting, and that's going to explode. Let's come to Alice on this.
I agree with a lot of what both you've just said, Wayne, and what Charlie said. I think CTV is incredibly exciting. I was there at the beginning of mobile. I used to work at a company called Millennial Media. I remember when mobile was completely siloed, completely segmented, and now no one even really talks about mobile as being a completely separate channel. It's just sort of like fully immersed when it comes to sort of measurement, frequency, etc. And I really do hope that does come for CTV over the coming years. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges with regards to measurement. I also do hope that we don't see all the budgets go to YouTube, and in actual fact that the budgets are actually more dispersed amongst you know, fast channels, about, you know, amongst all the different content that that is coming to the forefront. Because at the end of the day, all consumers care about is watching TV. They're not bothered about actually, you know, at what point that's coming through. But I'm just sort of coming back to sort of Q4 and outcomes, and like the importance of CTV and these other channels. Fundamentally, it's about being able to show that you're driving incremental lift. It's about being able to show that in actual fact that channel does have a part to play, and you're using that channel in a way that is driving enhanced reach, it's in driving enhanced frequency, rather than just sort of arguably cannibalizing your spend across multiple different channels. There is one channel that people haven't actually mentioned right now, is audio. We are starting to see audio really starting to almost like come out of the darkness and really start to explode with budgets. I mean, right now in the UK, there's 23 million people that listen to like at least a single podcast every single month. And there's these really the same way of what we've seen like within CTV, where are these really sort of niche content and niche audiences appearing. The same thing is happening in audio as well. And it really does offer a fantastic sort of immersion, sort of a audio immersion with that consumer, arguably the same way that you get that visual immersion when it comes to the big screen in your lounge. So we're definitely seeing audio starting to come up. And then the other things, just sort of touching a little bit on retail, we're starting to see out of home creep in, like really creep into the retail space. We've recently done an integration with Vibenomics. Admittedly, this is in North America, the capability. But we know, I mean, I've heard and read about Tesco is starting to bring those out of home screens and out of home audio actually physically into the stores. And so I am expecting to see that same sort of pull that's coming across from North America, starting to see that sort of audio and screen immersion physically in retail stores, and allowing programmatic to tap into that. So yeah, I mean, but ultimately it all comes down to being able to show incremental lift, incremental reach, incremental frequency, and there's some great technology out there that's allowing that to happen. But we definitely need to be doing more to be able to drive those better outcomes.
Absolutely. And I think, Alice, you bring up a really key point, and this actually ties in with our next question. When you talk about audio and you talk about, programmatic audio, most people kind of think radio. We don't usually consider, unless you're actually investing in it, you don't really think about podcasts. And podcasts are so topical that they attract very specific audiences. So, it is a really key investment opportunity. It leads into kind of our next question, because we can't have a podcast this year without talking, or a webinar this year without talking a little bit about cookie deprecation. I'm going to come to Alicia first, and I'm going to come back to you, Alice. But with the increasing clarity around cookie deprecation and the advancement of new identifiers, how do you see these developments influencing open market investment? And do you anticipate they will further accelerate the confidence we're seeing in Q4 around the open market, carrying momentum into the next year?
That's a big question, isn't it?
Question.
There's a lot in there. And I think for us, like, geo has always been Bliss's focus, but with cookie deprecation being kind of on the horizon for such a long time now, we definitely made that shift a while ago from it being a tactic, how to kind of target on a location basis, and instead have really heavily invested in it as technology and seeing that geo as identifier of an audience rather than it just being kind of something that we target. And we've applied that now across all of our partnerships as well. So within the platform, we've got partnerships with the likes of Sakana. So we've got sales till data receipts. We've got partnerships with people like VMO2 to have app usage data. And the identifier for all of those audiences is geo-based. And what that means is that it's not reliant on cookies, but it also means it's applicable in basically all environments. So going back to that omni-channel, you can apply geo across everything from YouTube, social, audio, TV. It kind of goes everywhere. And I think what that means is it's that new opportunity, I guess, to build those plans holistically, but without relying on cookies to do so. So I think there's a lot of excitement around some of these kind of new identifier solutions coming to market, or being able to use those solutions in a different way. I think also one of the problems that some platforms have seen is around match rates and having to kind of work around that solution. And geo just eliminates that problem. There are no match rate issues because it doesn't happen for geo. So that's definitely the route that we have kind of gone down, and what we've sort of like invested in. But yeah, definitely interested to hear Alice's perspective on it as well.
Go for it, Alice.
Yeah, to be honest, I love geo. I mean, I do wonder if this time next year we're going to be talking about IP deprecation instead of cookie deprecation. I mean, obviously that is something that's being discussed and is on the horizon. Equally, I mean, I know, Alicia, you're referring to scale there. We also have to be cognizant about what supply partners are actually doing with those IP addresses, whether or not they're being truncated as they come through in the bid stream, whether or not we are actually able to get that sort of precision on the geo to allow that sort of indexing and arguably that sort of separate identifier. I mean, again, I haven't done any sort of research on that, but I mean, that is something that we're starting to look into to actually see the impact. Similarly, we have the relationships with Sakana, with others, to be able to provide those sort of geo index solutions. At Yahoo, I think we're taking very much like a holistic approach. I mean, we always have done from the get-go. We do believe that there is an addressable deterministic identifier solution to sort of push out. That's because we are a publisher. We do have a plethora of logged in users that are there, but I've always been very sort of aware of the fact that there is a large swathe of supply that needs to be focused on from a non-addressable perspective as well, and have solutions to help. I think my biggest concern is that, and if there are any lessons that we learned from GDPR, the industry only does things when we're actually forced to do things. And with Chrome making the announcement that they're, pulling back on completely deprecating third-party cookies, I almost feel like it's brought like this greater grayness back in to the ecosystem. And if anything, I would arguably say that now is actually the time for brands and to actually be testing and to actually be figuring out what their identity strategy is, because at some point Chrome is going to be rolling something out, and at some point we are going to see those cookies sort of decrease more and more. So we haven't actually seen Q4 being like a big push from the sort of like identity and the cookieless place. But equally, I don't necessarily think that that is actually going to drive, as we start to see greater confidence, etc., greater uptake within the open marketplace. If anything, let's take a look at CTV and digital out of home. They're both cookieless solutions already, yet the majority of activity is still being bought through PMPs. It's still being bought through packages that are sort of pre-built, versus sort of almost like driving that confidence in the open marketplace. But the only other thing I would say is that with that whole cookieless thing, what we are starting to see is like innovation coming up with first party data, both around brands first party data and publisher first party data. We're starting to see greater, certainly from our side, we're starting to see greater appetite for using things like data clean rooms in order to be able to take those first party data signals and commingle them both for sort of activation and for measurement. But primarily, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see what happens in 2025. I would just sort of personally sort of say that if you don't have an identity strategy for cookieless that you're actively working on right now, you really do need to start thinking about it.
I'm very excited for the next couple of years. I feel like programmatic's been on the rise, for the last 10 plus years since, the inception of RTV. I feel like this year's been a bit of a blip. And Alice, I can absolutely relate to what you're saying, because the industry doesn't change, and we do not enact change until we're forced to. And, we had this cutoff for cookies that was going to happen at the beginning of Q3. And it scared the market, it scared investment in the open market. And we saw, revenue going to other channels such as social, etc. And now that that's not happening, we've already seen, investment back in the open marketplace. And, that is, I think, as we go into next year and that confidence rebuilds again and these new identifiers come in, we're going to continue to see that escalation. And I think we'll stop hearing very erroneous kind of comments like the open market is dead, because the open market isn't dead. We're just, seeing a lot of new emerging opportunities such as curation, which is a whole other discussion. We've got a couple of minutes left, so just a quick fire round from each of you. What is one area we all need to improve on to drive stronger programmatic outcomes during Q4 and the festive season? And I'm going to come to Alicia first.
It's going to sound like I've stolen it from Alice, but my point was better utilization of first party data.
Yeah, nice. And let's come to Charlie.
Be bold. Don't be scared to test.
Absolutely. We never stop testing. I feel like in our industry, we don't do enough testing like we used to. So yeah, absolutely. And try new channels and try kind of new metrics and, help support the industry evolve. Alice.
Start earlier. I loved hearing from Rory saying that you actually start in March. I mean, I have to be honest, I thought it was maybe sort of June, July, taking into account you started to tease your main ad out in September. But if I can just add one other thing, is same way puppies aren't just for Christmas, ad strategies aren't just for Christmas. Actually do think about sort of linking the Christmas strategy through into your sort of the longer term outcomes as well.
Absolutely. And Rory.
Yeah, I would say creative quality. We saw a Google study recently showing that 50% of digital advertising effectiveness comes from creative. So I think that's a big area for us to focus on.
Awesome. Before I hand back to Simon, we've got one very quick question that I'm going to come to Charlie on. Over the recent years, we've seen a backlash against overconsumption and more of a drive for sustainability from retailers. Is this something that can be incorporated in advertising outcomes? And we've got 30 seconds to answer.
All good. Short answer is yes. At MG, we're making an active decision to have a carbon calculator on every media plan, which is going to force our partners to produce that. I know that Bliss obviously are already working on this and have the ability to do this, and I'm pretty sure Yahoo can show this as well. So it's just about us being able to showcase to our clients. What I would say is what I've been working on is two things: custom algos, ingesting, for example, scope 3 data. The general consensus is if they are sustainable ads, the viewability and the quality tends to be better, therefore better outcomes. What I will say is, though, with performance clients, we need to balance how much we can push up a CPM in order to still drive that cost-effective ROAS, let's say, or profit for them. But in theory, what the studies we've seen, they are better quality ads. So we should be able to pay more, but get more from that outcome. So therefore, it should counterbalance each other. I hope that makes sense.
It makes sense. Thank you. And a massive thank you from me to all of you and our panelists. Charlie Pullen from MG OMD, Rory Wilson from John Lewis Partnership, Alicia May from Bliss, and Alice Beecroft from Yahoo DSP. I'm Wayne Tassie, Group Director of Programmatic at Double Verify, and more importantly for this session, Chair of the IAB Europe Programmatic Trading Committee. And to close the session, I'm going to pass back to Simon. Thank you very much for listening and joining us today. Simon, you're on mute.
I launched into it. This old and still can't use a Zoom call properly, honestly. Listen, what an awesome panel. Thank you everyone so much for your time. Great discussion. I was chomping at the bit and having to not interject myself. Everyone knows I like to get involved, but really interesting discussion. Thank you also to the active participants who asked questions. Love that engagement, helps drive a lot. So a massive thanks from us at IAB Europe to everyone for participating. I think also this panel actually hit almost all the topic areas of work we covered this year and are planning to cover next year. That's great verification for us. We're heading in the right direction. And it's a great also symptom of how much work there still is for us all to do, particularly collaboratively with IAB, with driving standards forward, with addressing some of those challenges we just spoke about in the panel. I'm going to ask Nicole if you could just bring up a slide, because hopefully the slide will reappear. Just a small plug in the last 2 minutes. This will be an amazing session, so please register and listen in to a live webinar with Daniel Knapp. He's talking about the state of the nation as we go into next year. So having talked about how to smash Q4, now Daniel is going to set you up for what you need to think about as you go into next year. So this will be an awesome session. Please do try and find the time. I think that's next Thursday, the 4th. I think it's next Thursday. Might be next Wednesday. But join it. It will be great. And that's it from us. So look, happy holidays, happy Christmas, happy Hanukkah, happy whatever religious festival reaches your boat, or if you don't have a religious festival, whatever makes you happy. That's it from us. Have a great year. This is our, as a committee, last output this year. So also thank you all for all the work that's been done through the year.
Thank you, guys. Amazing. Have a lovely into Q4. We'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.